Welcome back. I've got Matthew Pearson on the line. Matthew, how are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. You're doing some amazing work, and I thought I need to get you on the show. So why don't you share a little bit about you, and then we'll jump into the conversation.
Yeah, happy to. My name is Matt Pearson. I'm the founder of Town Square Advisors, which is a consulting firm framed around a concept called the Square Management System, which is a practical model that helps leaders drive organizational alignment without really dealing with micromanagement. It helps you build culture, the key part that helps the company scale sustainably.
It's important work, and as we kind of alluded to a little bit in the pre-show, it's like it helps with alignment, and we'll definitely talk about your book in a moment. But let's dive into the Square Management System. How did it come to be, and what are some of the techniques without giving away the Colonel's secret recipe, how to implement it in organizations?
Yeah, the key for this is that I've spent a varied career across executive management, driving growth in small and medium-sized businesses. I've also been in M&A on both the sell side and the buy side. So I've seen what it takes to scale a business, and I've also seen how value is created for those who do it well, and what happens when maybe you have a misstep and your culture ends up hurting your performance. Over the years, through all that learning, through all the conversations with companies, I was at once asked, well, how would you actually organize a business better, especially one that maybe has hundreds of employees across disparate offices that are maybe not in the same area? And my answer started to frame what became the Square Management System. What I've started to realize is that companies have defaulted to organizational processes and procedures that look at maybe a default position, like what a best place to work is. And they say, hey, if it works for this company, I'm going to copy that. And frankly, that's what a lot of business books do. They aggregate information and they say, hey, these are the six things here, the five things you need to know there that we found that these people did successfully. The misstep is that just because it worked for someone else doesn't mean it's going to work for you, for your company. The key thing that we've missed in this common sized approach to culture and organizational design is the individual employee. And the Square Management System does one thing, is intended to create a system for your company and your employees. And it tries to align, and good culture to me is just very simply the alignment between your employees and the company's ways of doing. If you both like the ways of doing, you've got a great culture. But employees don't start disgruntled, right? They don't start their first day disgruntled. They get that way. And how do they become that way over time? Some of them, they get that way when their beliefs, when the ways of doing start to fall away from how they want to do things. And that's because companies don't have a complete operational system to adhere to keep that culture intact. You get culture drift, you get going off strategy, and that causes problems. So this book, this system attempts to fix that.
Yeah, it's desperately needed. I've seen so many organizations that were doing great fall apart. And I've seen organizations that were an absolute toxic cesspool. And I
Mm.
literally, if I went into Wikipedia and typed that in, there'd probably be a picture of this organization in there. And a leader went in there and turned it around, and they, were growing and shining and doing, quite well. And there wasn't a whole lot of change of the personnel. It was
Yeah.
just, getting, buy-in, and that goes both ways,
It
as you
does.
know. A lot of times, so, well, we got to get the employees to buy into our vision. It's like, no, you got to buy into the vision of the employees, and then you can adapt what you're making. You can still, get the deliverables and the outcomes you want, but it's, leveraging, the talent you have. And, I know in
Exactly.
your career, there was some baseball elements to things. And
Sure.
yeah, I grew up. I remember my first career was in public accounting, and that was because of Topps baseball cards, because I was able to figure out how they calculated the stats on the back of the baseball card. I'm like, okay, I like this part. Wasn't any good at playing, but I could at least run the numbers. So, but you know this. It's like, if you want your team to be successful, you need to know your team. You need to know what they're
You.
capable of, and you set them up for success. And
Exactly.
and and
Exactly. One bad
or
apple can ruin, just they say in the sports terminology, one bad actor, one bad player can infect an entire clubhouse. And the same thing can happen in a company. No one really wants that hire that becomes that one bad actor, right? Um, The issue really becomes how do you have, every company has, maybe they have 40, 400, 4,000, 40,000 employees. How do you put this together at scale? How does this work? What I've come forward with in terms of how that process and procedures, how do you get that clubhouse aligned with the individuals, is a concept I call constrained independence. If you're in your offices, you have micro decisions that you need to make on a daily basis, but you can't make any decision, right? That would put you all over the place. And if every single employee was just off doing whatever they wanted to do, you'd have chaos. So, in order to get product and service delivery standards, in order to have organizational structure, companies put in constraint. That constraint can be very tight, what I call heavy constraint, or it can be very broad. And you cannot put someone who really likes heavy amount of constraint because there are people who love that. They don't really want to actually action their own independent ideas. They just want to be told what to do. They want to go execute. Other people want all of the control and the freedom to go build, and they would not be happy in that environment. There is a way to actually quantify and qualify what those procedures are to figure out the varying levels of constraint. And so if you think about an office as a square, hence the name square management system, there's four sides. Identity, which is who we are. That's how an organization defines itself. That's next is instruction, how we operate. That's clarity and consistency of expectation. And then intercommunication, which is what most people think culture is, but this is the nature of how people interact. It's intercommunication, like hierarchy, meeting cadence, tone, things like that. And then last is information feedback. Is performance actually measuring and being used to evolve the business? Is there a feedback loop that allows those things to ensure that your business is staying aligned? Those four sides have 10 elements, and you can use them especially in the book, The Culture of Alignment, that I'm working on publishing. You can understand what qualities will be a heavy level of constraint for that specific element, or a light level of constraint, or a moderate one in case you find yourself in the middle. And you can know this, and it's great for an individual. Go online at townsquareadvisors.com, take the free quiz. You're going to learn a little bit about maybe your preferred working environment and what's best for you. Correspondingly, you can do the quiz if you're an executive and you're like, hey, we're off on culture. We got retention problems. We just have a bad vibe in the office. Got to get it right. What's going on? Take the free quiz. And if you want to, you could spring for the 40 element survey and actually learn a lot more about how to structure your business the right way and figure out what that desired level of constraint is.
Yeah, it's important for you to constantly measure the temperature of things. And if you assume everything's good, well, that might, bite you really quick because sometimes you can have the ship going in the right direction, but a degree off, you're heading towards an iceberg or off course or things like that. So it's not a set it and forget it thing. It is an ongoing conversation. And I was on a show yesterday, actually, and they were talking about policies and procedures and HR and retention and whatnot. But they were taking it from having a diverse office, from different people with different cultures and backgrounds and things like that. And I say, well, how do you design an organization that can be diverse? And my argument on it was, well, it has to happen naturally. If you force it, it's going to feel forced. And I'll use this analogy. It's like the mid '90s Yankees team. I know you're in Boston, so you'll enjoy this
I am
part
a
of it.
Red Sox fan. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Nothing wrong with that, and the mid '90s Yankees team before Torrey and Jeter and all those guys started showing up. George was spending money. It was all-star team from 1 to 9, and they weren't winning anything. They didn't cash it in and all that stuff because they were forcing. Okay, we got to get the best for this, the best for that, instead of having a team of a variety of different players and role players. Your Paul O'Neills and your Scott Brociouses. Yeah, when the Red Sox were winning championships not that long ago, yeah, you had some key people. You had Big Pappy and all the other guys, but you also had a lot of players that
You
would
had a great
come.
culture. Yeah.
Yeah, you had a great culture. Tito ran a great organization, continues to do it. I love Francona. He's one of my favorites as far as baseball guys out there. But there's obviously a ton of other great managers out there too, but that are doing quite well as well because they kind of follow the same themes in that
Yeah.
you've got this. You got your talent and you understand who they are. You've got someone. It's like, okay, I can bring this guy in off the bench, in the eighth inning when we need a clutch hit, and boom, it's like, You turn on the faucet and the water
Yep.
flows. It's like I'm going to put them in there.
Right.
They're going to put the ball in play. We're going to move the runners forward. We might score a run. We scrap out a win.
Exactly.
You,
Well,
you
the
do.
great cultures create a trust environment, right? And
Mhm.
so when you have trust, you know that your colleagues are going to make the right decisions. You know what decisions that they're going to make. You know your boundaries. You know where to play. You don't have to ask for permission all the time. So you're a faster mover. If you are making your own decisions, you feel like you're ingrained in the output. You're involved. You're actually part of the growth of the business, as opposed to be feeling like you're just doing it. One of my favorite quotes I read about in the book is a lot of just office horror stories. And there's one time in one of the places I worked where a junior employee was getting yelled at, and the CEO said to him, "I don't pay you to think, I pay you to do." And that is a clear example of a high constraint environment. This person was only there to execute. And of course, that was a problem for that employee that didn't quite fit in. When you have that trust environment where people know the box they can play in, the square that they can bounce around in, everyone moves faster, everyone's happier, they trust each other, they know what to do, they know where they're going, they know the expectations. And that's what the square management system's trying to do, just like your sports analogies. It's trying to get everyone on the same team regardless of skill. If you're a free mover and you trust everyone, you can just play better, you can work better together, you're happy employees, and that's what creates scale instead of just hiring for the best people. And that's where we've defaulted to. We've gone to a hiring that's common size. We're going to get the best employee instead of looking at whether or not they actually fit the system that they're going into. So I'm trying to change that methodology. The key part here too is this is actionable. You said don't give away the secret sauce. I want to give away the secret sauce. The whole point of the book, it's on the website. Go in there, dig in, learn about the systems, learn about all the key pieces of how you organize that business so that you can put together the right system. Or as an individual, learn about the system that makes the most sense for you.
And the beautiful thing about the system is a lot of people think, okay, here's the guidelines, which there obviously are there, but it's adaptable to your organization, much
It
like
is.
when you're
Yeah.
bringing people in, you're like, okay, I'm looking for, this perfect person. We're going to use a data analysis person. They're going to have 17.5 years. They worked in this industry. They worked with these clients, kind of find that unicorn in
Right.
the sky kind of thing where it's like, okay, no, let's go find somebody that's hungry. And I remember early in my career, when I was running healthcare organizations, when I first entered that arena, I had zero healthcare experience other than being a consumer of the system, going to the doctor occasionally and whatnot. And here I am running a primary care clinic, and I didn't I didn't know what I was doing when I started, and and they knew I didn't know what I was doing because they knew my background. I was there in that organization a year before I found out why they hired me, which is not your typical question after you get the offer letter. You say
No, not at
thank you,
all.
you take it. You don't go to them and say, well, I'm curious, why did you hire me? But they actually we did a 1 year anniversary retreat, and one of the board members said, "Well, we hired Mike because we knew, even though he didn't have the experience, that he was going to learn everything he needed to learn to be successful and leverage the skills and the knowledge of everybody around to make this a possibility." And I was like, "Oh, so that's why you hired me. Okay, good." But it was just, again, it was an example. And, I look back, and that was a long time ago. And I look back at that organization, and a good chunk of the people that I hired are still there, which it's been 16 years now, I think. Yeah,
Oh,
do the
wow.
math, yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
That's a great testament.
no, actually, 18 years. It's 18 years. Yeah, there's still a handful. The doctors are still there, and a handful of the administrative team are still there, because I hired good people and
Right.
created, there was an environment there where they could thrive and grow and be a part of the community and things. And, most of them stayed on. A few of them left because they went on to bigger and better things. And, I did that throughout my career. I remember hiring people and letting them learn and grow and do things so they could get promoted and go somewhere else if they wanted to, because there's a certain plateau that they would hit in our
Sure.
organization, and they
Sure.
wanted to go into another industry or another part of the sector, and they did. And of course, the doctors and the board were mad at me for losing these individuals. I'm like, I wanted them to be the best. We're helping the system, the whole thing, not just our little
Right.
microcosm of a location. And I think, again, that's, where the system comes into play too, is people, especially employees, but managers too, but, employees, they can find out that, quite frankly, maybe there's a new thing that they find interesting, and all of a sudden they become one of the best in your organization at something, and that's not what they were originally doing. When you have a system like yours, it it just creates so many opportunities, and the trust factor is a big one. Yeah,
Yeah, the
that.
trust factor, big one. Yeah, there's so many components to how you create a good culture. To your point, you got to give people, part of it is development. That's part of information feedback. And some people want more messaging around their development, and some people don't want as much. Some people want, from an intercommunication perspective, they want to go to the office every single day. They want to be around their employees. They want to have the ping pong table. And some people just want to sit in their own office by themselves. Everyone has a way of doing. And I think part of this was a response to a degree to a meeting I was in years ago at an office where the CEO said, culture is just this amorphous way of doing. And I was like, man, we just got to be able to do better than that. It's not. It is quantifiable. It is understandable. And if both sides understood each other better and acknowledged that that's who we are, why should an employee chameleon themselves into fitting into an environment that they're not happy in just for a job? That sucks the life out of you, right? So you got to know as an employee where you are successful or where you're not. More so, the company needs to set up itself for success and bring in the people who are going to survive in that environment and do well. Part of this is having the constitution to know that maybe I don't fit that company. That doesn't make me a bad person, doesn't make me a bad employee. I'm just different than that company's way of doing, and that's okay. The key point here is there is no correct culture. I did have AI take the quiz and tell me what they thought the correct culture was, but technically speaking, the correct culture is the one that works for that company. And if they align the people to that culture, then they're okay. A lot of people think of like Wall Street and investment bankers because I was an investment banker, and it is a little bit of a different environment. It's a little bit tougher, and some people thrive in that environment and they love it. And it wasn't for me, but there were people at that company who'd been there for 20 something years who spoke highly about their experience and would never have left. How does that happen? Again, it's because people have different ways of doing, and that's okay. We've gone too far to tarnish the people who don't fit in companies and say, well, that's because Michael was a bad actor. He's a bad employee. No, not at all. You're a great person, very successful. You just didn't fit their way of doing, and that's okay. We have to understand that as a culture in order to build cultures the right way and to have a healthier working environment for people.
Yeah, there was a handful of people at the last primary care clinic that I took over that just weren't the right fit.
Right.
They were good at what they did, but they weren't the right fit. So, using an old Jack Welch term, I dehired them, and
Yeah,
but then turned right around and gave them glowing references, and they both went on to better roles that paid them more money, better benefits, you name it, across the board, because quite frankly, just because you're not a fit here doesn't mean you're not a fit somewhere else. I don't,
exactly.
I don't want to, punish anybody. Having been on both sides of the fence of losing my job and letting somebody go, I would say letting somebody go is harder.
Yes.
And a lot of people like they look at you and I'm like, you understand something when you get let go, you're trying to figure things out, and all of a sudden, if you're letting somebody else go, you know that side of it, but you're also going, ooh, I just impacted somebody's life by a business
It's tough.
decision. And
Yeah. Yeah.
but again, you have to think about what's the best for them, because in many cases they were struggling,
Yeah.
um, because again, it was a misalignment. That's all, and they did well going
Exactly.
somewhere else. And I think that's a whole part of the whole. You say system, but sometimes I use the phrase ecosystem. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
you're on this microcosm of the entire universe or planet, however you want to look at it. And there's different components and different things that cause and effect. But the more you understand those things, the more you can adapt and navigate around or through situations. But again, that's where
Right.
knowing your people and having the trust flow every which way can help you navigate things, whether it's the challenges that all the organizations face during the pandemic or economic issues. Maybe there's tariff related matters at the time of this recording. There could be things like that that's impacting your business. Yeah, well, okay, we can sit here and play victim and go, woe is me, or we can go, okay, how do we address this? What can we do to mitigate this? And when you have that environment and everyone has some input in there, because, they've created the environment for everybody to be able to share their viewpoints and observations, it makes a huge, huge difference.
It does. I think the great thing about the system is that it's designed to be used frequently. The way you can use it as a diagnostic, if you're an executive and you are worried about your culture, or you're wondering, hey, do I have all the systems in place correctly? You take the system, you take the 40 elements, and you'd send the survey out to the varying levels of in your employee stack. So your executive team, senior, middle, and the front line. And you'd aggregate those scores. Very quickly, you're going to figure out where the disparity is between views of ways of doing at the company so that if you're because each side of the score of the square can be scored. And so you'll know, and they're not supposed to be equal. If you're a believer in heavily constrained environments, not all four sides will be heavily constrained. Some might be light, some might be medium, some might be very constrained, and that's okay. That's because you're using it to design the company that you wanted to affect. But if you compare contrast, you can see the delta and you'll know exactly what to go fix. Hey, wait a second. Our onboarding isn't good enough. Our front line is telling us that there are problems in how we onboard people and how we do training internally. We have to fix that. Our senior team thinks it's great, but it's apparently not. That's the source. Or you can get into the identity problem, and maybe we went off strategy with our product to mission fit, and we acquired a company, and the customers and the staff were wondering, what are we doing here? Where are we going as a company? They're losing faith in us. We didn't realize we didn't communicate properly, or we set up our branding and our marketing wrong. So you can use this as a great diagnostic. For startups and for founders who maybe have a great product, and we see this a lot in startups, but they don't know how to run a company because that's not what they're good at. They're great at the tech. This will give you the framework to then figure out how to actually put your company together. What systems do I even need as a startup to allow me to succeed and to scale? This will allow you to figure that out as well. So there's a lot of use cases there for it, which is why it's been something that's been popularly received, and it is actionable. It's not meant to be. It's philosophical at the start. You got to understand why we broke culture in the first place with this common size view of best places to work. But then we reconnect and say, hey, this is knowable and identifiable, and you should intentionally construct it to the way you want to, and you'll actually have a better output. And that's the whole point.
Yeah, it's great that it can be used by a variety of different organizations and especially startups and new entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs that have been at it for a few years. It's always good to take stock and see where things are, and utilizing this method is going to help you kind of see, okay, is there any gaps or areas I'd like to improve on and all of that. And when you mentioned the four corners and the four sections and things like that, top of mind came and you said because the scores could be different. I said that's going to drive people that are OCD absolutely crazy if it's not all equal. They're like, oh no, it's got to be 90-degree angles across the board. It's like, I'm sorry, even if you build a wall in a corner and it's 90 degrees today, the way the earth moves in, it's not going to be 90 degrees in a year, and that's going to
It's
drive.
not.
So just don't measure that part, people,
Exactly.
because it's going to drive
Exactly.
you crazy. So,
The
and
crazy part about it, I asked AI, because the whole point of the book is that there is no perfect culture. It's the one that works for you, for your company. But I did challenge AI to say, hey, take the survey. What do you think the optimal outcome is? And it does actually foretell, they said moderate in identity to allow you to scale or change or pivot in the market if you need to. Really heavy constraint on instruction so that people are really nailed down how they're supposed to act. Really loose intercommunication to allow freedom of speech and intercommunication and connection in your staff, and a moderate degree of information feedback so that you're not overdoing your analysis, you're not overdoing your data analytics, but you're doing enough to make sure that you're staying aligned and on top of things. That was AI's view. I can't disagree with it. It actually makes a ton of sense. But don't take my word for it. Take the test yourself and see where you fit. As much as we talked about executives and framing, me, the reader, the individual, you got to know about you too. And there is a degree where sometimes, and I've been there, you've probably been there, where you kind of need a job and you're like, hey, this is a up level, this is a salary increase. Okay, there's a couple warning signs about the company, but I'll make it work. Don't worry about it. And then you get in there and you're like, oof, this is a little bit of a different environment. Maybe I shouldn't have done that. And you have to be honest with yourself. Like maybe you should have waited. Maybe that extra 20, 30 grand in salary wasn't worth it. And that this book will also help the individual figure out maybe where they fit.
that's awesome. So, love this conversation, Matthew. Where can people find out more about you, the book, and everything, the tool, and everything else you're doing?
Yeah, they can go to townsquare-advisors.com. On there are the free quizzes. So if you're just really curious, it's 10 questions. You can do it as an individual or as an executive for your company. And you can find a link there to take the full 40-point survey to really dig in and get granular about the Square management system. Correspondingly, you can sign on for an advanced copy of the book. We're working on publication on that and raising awareness for it. So Culture of Alignment is where you'll find the more detailed information around the philosophy of the Square management system. And you can sign up on the website for that as well.
Awesome. I'll definitely have that in the show notes. So Matthew, loved our conversation today. Thank you for being you and for all this amazing work.
Really appreciate it. Great conversation. Thanks for having me.